Thank you, Rabbi Yedwab. Squishy, that's... Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's always an honor to be here and to do a little bit of learning with you. It's exciting. It's not in my usual rabbinic pattern to be able to give sermons like this, so it's very special. So thank you for having me. So I don't know about you, but I was always a spiritual guy. So much so that when I told my mom that I was deciding to become a rabbi, I think her exact reaction was something like, "Finally." For me, on the other hand, this decision was an unanticipated detour in the course of my life. It wasn't until my sophomore in college existential crisis that I considered becoming a rabbi. So why did I become a rabbi? Well, thank you for asking. I grew up in the arts, musical theater, singing, even dancing. Everyone actually in my family is very musical. We even had a family band. I had been dancing actually for 13 years and even professionally with the Seattle Jazz Company until they went under. And for all intents and purposes, this was my path. Then when I was a sophomore at the University of Washington, I was on track to be a music teacher. And I remember the moment when it all fell apart. I had my staff paper, my piano, I was writing music like I thought I'd ever wanted to, and this was supposed to be an ultimate moment, and I just felt nothing but frustration. Not because it was hard or that I didn't enjoy it, but because it didn't fit. I was at a loss. The dance department wasn't for me, neither was the theater department, and in the midst of venting and spiraling to my friend, she said, "Have you ever thought about becoming a rabbi?" "No," I said, and I paused and thought, "Is that a full-time job?" Rationally, in that moment, I really was thinking about how this could be and would be the coming together of all of my different passions and interests into some kind of a balance. There would be philosophy and education, performance and teaching and community building. And in that moment, something else clicked. Like when a cart locks on the track on a roller coaster to an unknown destination, there was a kind of a discomfort and a fear, but also a new kind of trust, because although I really had no idea what it would take or what it would look like to walk this path, I felt it in my kishkas and I knew that it was right, and I started making changes. So was that some kind of calling? I really don't ever call it that. There was a very rational discernment process of a calculating risk, weighing my interests, my passions, my readiness for a new adventure. And there was an earnest, in your gut check profound truth moment that helped me cross this threshold to make this life-changing decision. My question really is, first one to you is, do you ever have that? Do you ever want that? Does that in your gut check, inner knowing, profound truth feeling influence your decision-making ever? Maybe you check in with your emotions, or maybe you're one of those people who just trusts yourself and makes life's choices without a shred of self-doubt. If that's you, please find me after this sermon and let me know your secret. The first line of this week's Torah portion, Vayikra, or really the calling, points us towards this conversation and the role and presence of a divine voice as an influence to our stories, not only the dramatic ones of Passover, but the ones that we tell ourselves. The first line of the book, Vayikra el Moshe v'yedaber Adonai elav ma'ohel moed lemor. The Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying. Called, spoke, and saying. 3 words for God's voice come at us here in the first sentence, nearly all at once. And this is the first line of the book of Leviticus. And the biblical narrative is imploring us to pay attention to God's voice and how we access it. So, what did Moses hear when God called out to him? Some rabbinic philosophers say that it was an audible voice. Others say that maybe it was something like the burning bush. Others say that God's speech was transmitted through Moses' intellect and then verbalized by Moses. Or maybe I wonder if it was a in your gut check profound truth feeling kind of influence. Maimonides, while affirming that the communication between God and Moses is a fundamental Jewish belief, holds that there are not enough clues to know for sure. That, quote, no one has ever known what took place except Moses himself, for whom that speech reached. So some kind of enduring mystery. And yet we also know, in a real way, through the evolution of this tradition, from going away from sacrifices into the liturgy like we're singing today, or the ongoing addition of new commentary and the evolution of Jewish ritual, or the tools of teshuvah even, that we, and not just Moses, has access to this divine presence. Judaism believes that you do not need an intermediary to talk to God for you. That these sacred conversations are necessary for meaningful change, and that you should not be the same at the end of any Jewish ritual experience as you were at the beginning of it. Now, I have to say, I really side with Maimonides here, and I don't have the hubris to tell you that a gut feeling or your own intuition is the same as the calling from a divine voice. I respect science. I'm curious about particle physics and neurology, and I believe in the wisdom of nature. And I'm also a rabbi, and I believe that there is an ability to access the echoes and ripples of this ancient voice, whether that's through the inner monologues that we tell ourselves, or the gut feelings that focus our attention, or through the writing and transmission of this tradition, translated from scroll to commentary to ritual and cultural practice. Our access to this voice hinges on how we listen and use the tools of this ancient wisdom tradition, and in case you didn't know, that's part of the rabbi gig too. Which brings us to Passover, and this season of storytelling, where we use tools and ritual items to tell the story as if we were there. Even there, listening and following the leadership of Moses, and tasting the bitterness of slavery, applying this tradition to our own lives, whether or not you believe the water is parted, as described in the Torah, or if you even ever only make it through the first half of the Seder. We all have equal access to these tools and this story. And I like to teach that, like all things Passover, there are 4 ways that we tell the Passover story: historically, symbolically, dramatically, and deliciously. The historical telling of this origin story is a linear approach. This is something that happened to some group of people a long time ago in a land far away. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, with very minimal evidence beyond the fact that we're still telling this story and acting it out. Archaeology is your guidepost. The Torah is an artifact. An X always marks the spot. The symbolic telling is nonlinear. The Seder plate items, the 4 children, the orange, the cup of Miriam, the cup of Elijah, all are symbols designed to transport us to different aspects of this experience. Only when you have touched every piece, listened to each detail, can you start hearing that still small ancient voice behind the story of a people becoming Israel. The dramatic telling sits at the intersection of the roller coaster that is your life and the themes of the story from oppression to freedom. This is the story that is likely the one you're telling yourself, that is liable to spiral and get vented to a friend or even a rabbi. Your inner monologue that, if you can attach it to a journey to freedom, might liberate you from a cycle or pattern behavior that you are ready to take the uncomfortable actions to make a change. And the delicious storytelling is my favorite. It hinges on the belief that food tells a story. There is a symbolism on the Seder plate, but what is the story behind the food that you're serving? This is also where we at The Well draw our inspiration for Friend Seder. It's an initiative powered by The Well that gives you the tools to make the story your own. We say if Passover tells the national story of the Jewish people through food, Friend Seder tells your story. Each of these methods are different ways to tell the story and hear the calling of a more sacred ancient voice. Together they make up a kind of Passover consciousness, to let Passover be the tool for transformation, empowering us to be present to what we're being called to pay attention to in this moment, and as well as being called on us to imagine and envision a different and better, freer version of our life together. Can you imagine a future that is a different path to something better, but requires us to give up some kind of comfort and certainty and familiarity with what we know, and adopt a kind of commitment of work towards something new and beautiful that's also a risk because it's only a vision and not yet reality? What would that feel like? What would that taste like? This is the calling of Passover consciousness, or which is to say Judaism. Back at the well, one of the highlights of our work for a more fun and accessible, inclusive, and intentional Jewish community has been developing a collaboration with Zingerman's Delicatessen through Friend Seder. For the past 2 years, we've worked with them to host a Zingerman's Friend Seder brunch, a tasting experience inspired by a rich diversity of Passover flavors, which would not have been possible without a little luck and a clear shared vision for how we wanted to design new access points for Jewish identity through storytelling and food. In his book, The Personal Power of Visioning, co-founder of Zingerman's Ari Weinsweig teaches that, quote, "What emerges when we write our vision is almost always stuff that we've actually known about at some conscious or unconscious level for a long time. We knew it, but never let ourselves really own that we wanted it or believed we could make it real. Visioning work brings these sort of secret passions to the forefront, gets our creative juices flowing, and helps to remind us that we really can make much of what we want a reality in our daily lives. If you're willing to try it out and trust it, the visioning process will almost always successfully bring out a positive picture of the future. And you can do this too. And not only do you have permission, but you have an open invitation to do so at your Seder table. In just under 2 weeks from now, it'll be time to tell the story. So on this Shabbat, if you haven't already, it may be time to start writing that personal vision and listen to that inner knowing about how to make it a reality. May we be blessed with the seeds of new visions, pausing and unlocking new narratives, and listening and feeling for that voice that will help us find a path that feels right, feels free, so that you may pursue meaningful change in this new season. Shabbat Shalom.